everybody. This is Heather from Can You Cure Cancer, and I decided to talk today about the 7 stages of grief. I just did a post on the 7 stages of grief and why we call it a grief process. And it's just something that's really close to me right now as I'm going through it myself. And I joke around constantly that it is not so much a linear process. That's what everybody says. It's not a linear experience, but I call it the toilet bowl because quite literally you feel like you're swirling around. It's a roller coaster you can't get off, and it takes you to all kinds of places. Every time you think you've moved through a phase, you wake up the next morning to be right back where you started. So I wanted to talk about that a little bit and go through each of the 7 stages. Again, I just did a blog on it, so you can always check that out at canyoucurecancer.com. But I wanted to start with the fact that it used to be considered 5 stages of grief. So if you're thinking, what is she talking about right now? And that was what you had learned. I too in school learned that it was 5 stages of grief. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross was the one that first introduced that concept. And David Kessler was actually somebody who wrote a book following that up with a 6th stage that he added with the title of his book. But that all aside, it has over time, as everything does, developed. People have added to it. I think it's just progressively moved on to people feeling like I do, which is that there's a million stages. It's not just acceptance and denial and these few things, which I don't think was ever the intention of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross either, was to just box them into little compartments all neat and tidy. She's always spoken of it as not a linear experience. But I definitely think over time, we've just added to it things that we felt like needed to be there and have their own acknowledgement. So to go through each of the 7 steps, I guess that's probably the next place I should go. Starting with shock and denial. It used to be just the denial phase, I believe, that has progressed into shock and denial. So I think of this as the filter phase. That's the best way I can explain it. And it's a kind of a beautiful gift. David Kessler himself actually explained it as grace, which I thought was a beautiful thing to hear because I have a very hard time ever speaking of grief without incorporating God. And I know that there's a lot of people now that are not so much religious, more spiritual, or just not believers these days. I tend to be kind of the polar opposite, where I think if I didn't have my faith in God through this, that I'm not sure where I'd be right now. I have a hard time understanding how anybody could sort of go there with not having belief in something bigger and still getting through this, because it is a mind, body, and spiritual experience. And yeah, I guess I could just leave it at that. But so to go along with this piece of grace that I was talking about, I think that it's like your body just can't take, your mind can't take, your existence just can't take it all at once. I laughed the same day my husband passed, which I'll get to that later, but it's funny how one experience can trigger the next and the next. It seemed impossible. I thought I would never smile again. And then I found myself laughing with the nurse as we were clearing out the huge amounts of medications that we had. And I realized that that levity, it had been heavy for a very long time in our house. We knew it was coming, and it definitely didn't mean I wasn't at rock bottom and completely broken, but I did still experience that little moment of just a little laughter, and whether it was I was doing it for her own comfort, or for myself, I don't know. But yeah, you can get physically ill at this phase. This is not an easy one. Your heart will race. You could be sweating. You could be vomiting, all kinds of things. And I've pretty much experienced all of those as well. But it's sort of, I also called in my blog it like a soap opera phase, because it's as though you're watching somebody else's life or experience, and it almost feels like it's not happening to you. So that would be the first phase. That was my experience with it. Pain and guilt would be the next one. Not just emotional pain, but physical pain as well. This was the next step I was alluding to a moment ago. So as soon as I experienced that little bit of like a laugh, guilt immediately set in for me. So with pain and guilt, yes, there's definitely physical pain. I mean, I when people say broken, it came from that's come over time, I'm sure, from a place of literally feeling broken because my body felt like it couldn't support me anymore. I was just broken. I was broken from being a caregiver. I was broken from being emotionally just torn for like a year and a half of just wanting so desperately to save the love of my life, and the physical pain of moving them around. And there's so much as a caregiver, there really is. I don't think that caregivers get enough, and nurses get enough credit for what they do. What a gift you can give to somebody if you can manage it and hold it together and do all of that for somebody. But some of the memories sort of stay with you and are hard to shake. I can imagine if you've lost a parent, that that too must be an experience like none other. If you were the caregiver for them, because for sure there are things you never think you'll have to do for a parent. Things I'm sure the parents have done for you in your life, but that you never imagined the role would be reversed. And I felt like that with my husband as well. It was just a really hard experience, but I wouldn't take it back for anything. It was a gift for him. It was a gift for us. So that's that phase. But I will say, experiencing joy doesn't have to be something you feel guilty about. That doesn't mean it won't happen, because I know this in my head, and yet still I find myself for sure find myself just feeling guilty about those moments of joy. I always try to remind myself, though, if he were here, he would not want me slumped up on a couch in my pajamas. He would want me getting dressed, going out, bringing my kids to fun experiences, having a smile on my face. And I try to do that. I really try to do that. I always joke around that he would want me to just not just smile, but, really have those gut wrenching laughs where you just, tears in your eyes from laughing so hard. So we try to have big experiences like that and never just, go through the motions of it, but really try to experience actual joy. So the third step is anger and bargaining. I'm angry, and I know if you've followed my blog, you know this, because I'm taking it out on cancer. That's my own coping mechanism. Let's get even, right? But no, in all seriousness, I'm angry. I mean, a lot of people are angry with the person who passed, and I'm sure some people are angry with my husband, I'm sure. I mean, for not telling them sooner, for hiding it, for, for just leaving us too soon. I can understand that wholeheartedly. My heart wants to be angry, but my mind keeps explaining it away. If anybody's had the experience of knowing someone's passing, the beauty in that is he was able to tell me he did not want to die. This is not his fault. If he could have still stuck around and been here, he put in every effort to save his own life and to do it right. I'm sure if you're dealing with loss, sometimes maybe somebody did take their own life. There's all kinds of different levels of where this anger can come from, and it's different for everybody. But my own experience with it was, I'm angry, but I'm taking it out on cancer. I'm not taking it out on God. I don't believe in a God. I don't know why anybody would believe in a God that would just purposely put you in angst and bad situations. No, that doesn't make any sense to me. I truly feel like this was probably in a lot of ways something that had to come to pass, and a gift in a sense. Definitely eye-opening. A lot of our community has talked to me about the changes they've made in their own lives as a result of this. So bigger than me for sure, but I certainly can't be angry at the person who created me and put me here and gave me that beautiful, blessed life with my husband. So I don't do that. But I still need to direct that anger somewhere, and cancer is the receiver of that, which I think is a beautiful thing. If you can find a way to just funnel all that anger into being mad at something that makes a positive change in the world, then, I mean, winning, right? Take that, cancer. So that would be the guilt and bargaining phase. Let's see, where did I leave off? So the fourth would be depression, reflection, and loneliness. Yeah, so I say this is where hoarders are created, and it's not to be funny, but I truly think that in a sense, it's like where you start to close yourself in a bit, and try to block the outside world out. And so I could see where that would happen. I kind of went to the other extreme where I probably should have paused a little bit on this, but started digging out old bins and just getting rid of things. Nothing that was, anything I'd regret, but his old books and binders from college and things that, like, I don't know why we hold on to some of the things we do anyway. Some of our kids' clothing from when they were babies. I mean, we had held on to it just so someday if their kids wanted it. I think it's like your own issues of letting go, and maybe you can just somehow make an excuse for a future use for something. So I started just going through and getting rid of things, but I could see the alternative. But at the same time, the same experience happened where I blew up my house, basically, not literally, but with bins and taking things out of storage and dumping them on the floor and going through it. And I did create an environment where it wasn't really conducive to having people come over. I jokingly spoke in the blog about not showering, but it's true. I put clothes on and a presentable look to do these YouTube videos, but I am still in the preference of pajamas on a couch. So it's a really hard step to get out of, because I feel like the three things tend to cyclically lend to the next. So for instance, I'm lonely. So then I get depressed, which then makes me sit and reflect, or I start to reflect and that leads to the depression, which leads to the loneliness, or, any which way, they all tend to just keep feeding into one another. So it's a kind of ride that you really need to get off of, but it's a very difficult one too, because they keep sort of feeding into each other. Having children for me is a gift because I have to get them to school. I have no choice. I'm coaching sports teams. I have to be there for those kids. I have to, I'm still working, obviously. I started this company, and all of these things I'm glad I said yes to. And I think that the experience of saying yes and doing things like that definitely makes it so now I have a commitment and I have no real option but to continue going through the steps of getting up, getting dressed, having to do it for someone else, because I'm certainly not in the mood of doing it for myself at the moment, which again, that's fine. That's, it's just the way it goes. Like sometimes if you need to just do one thing to get to the next step, that's what you do. There's no right and wrong here. It's just an experience, personal for everybody, but you find your way, and whatever it is that gets you to the next step, to the next day. And sometimes it's just moment by moment, just to see what can get you to the next moment. And then from there, hopefully by that time you've got something else that's pushing you to the next step. So let's see. So after depression, reflection, and loneliness, we have the upward turn. So this is like the glimpse, I would say, a glimpse of happy, maybe, like, where, kind of similar to like the shock and denial, but at this point it's not so much that you're coming from experiencing a moment of joy because you're sort of in denial about what's really going on. It's more of like now you're at a point of having just those little moments of good. But again, as I said at the start, what happened for me, anytime I get those little glimpses, those little moments, the guilt sort of sets in, and that's a hard one to just overcome. But so just a little thing. It might be really little. It might not even be noticeable. But I don't know, if you're a woman, maybe you shave your legs and curl your hair that day. I don't know. If you're, somebody who's just been saying no to everything, maybe that one day, that one time you say yeah and go grab a cup of coffee with a friend. Or maybe it is just like your kids tell a joke and you actually crack a smile to the answer of it. Or, little things, little. For me, I always joke around. I'm like, oh, I put a brush through my hair today. It's like a big deal. But my friends that know me know that I usually am somebody who's always dressed up, always wearing something nice and trying to just put on my best face, so to speak, and just be happy and upbeat and outgoing. And lately I do my best, but I still probably look, even though I'm getting out of my pajamas, I'm putting something else on that pretty much feels like pajamas and makes me feel like I'm still just sitting on the couch at home. maybe like a huge oversized sweatshirt of my husband's that smells like him or whatever. But if it's what I can do, that's what I can do. And again, having things that push me along is good. But then in those moments when I'm out and about and doing little things, that's sometimes when those little moments of happy can creep in, because sometimes it's almost like life is happening and for a moment, just a moment, I forget. And, I just get caught up in the excitement of seeing my kids score a basket or something. And I get like, so excited and screaming from my seat or like, and I think, oh my gosh, well, I can't feel guilty about that. I do, but really my husband would be there standing on the bench pretty much freaking out over something like that my kid had done. And I don't want them to miss out on that experience either. I want them to still have that happy that they're missing from him. So I just keep trying to do that. So that's how I sort of am going through that phase. So the sixth thing would be reconstruction and working through. So this is kind of like starting to regain control through the messy aftermath. Like you think of like a tornado that sweeps through and then everybody comes out and looks and sees this sort of like wreckage and just having to sort of maneuver your way through it all. Well, that's sort of what that phase is about, is just sort of now what, whether it means you're returning to work or you're finding a new way or, just the aftermath is a lot. There's a lot. And it's not just like literally like the after wake of like funeral planning and all that. It's like emotionally, all that baggage and stuff that's sort of like a moment of like, wow, this is real. This is where I'm at. This is, yeah. So you're working through that. It's messy and it's not pretty, but that again, I'm going to go back to my toilet bowl talk because yeah, there's a swirl. It's not linear and you're not just going, I'm referring to them as steps 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, but it's not in order and it's not this and then that comes and then you're waiting for this to happen. It's not that at all. It's quite literally in a day, honestly, in an hour, I think I've gone through all of these experiences, sometimes like boom, 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 just to start back or out of order, and some of them I've never even had as experiences yet. And maybe never will, whereas somebody else might be completely stuck in just that one phase that I have never even experienced. So it's so vastly different. Yeah, sorry, I get lost in my thoughts when I start thinking back to a lot of these moments. But lastly, or not lastly, again, talking roller coasters, but acceptance and hope. And that's kind of like, for me, people talk about moving on or closure, and I hate those terms. Both of those terms are pet peeves for me. There's no closure with this. There's not going to be closure with this. I think anybody that says that, I would argue it. I would literally debate any person that wants to say there's closure or moving on. There is, however, moving forward, which to me is a very, very different thing, and it looks very, very different. I'm never going to move on because that's like leaving my husband behind, and that's not going to happen. Moving forward is just that. It's going forward. It's not being stuck anymore. It's not giving up. It's not, what my heart wants to do, which is just to quit, close the world out, turn off the lights, and, wake up in a couple centuries, right? No, but it's really not, it's not moving on. I'm not moving on, and I hope you're not moving on either, because I don't want you to leave behind anybody that was special to you. I think that moving forward is really healthy and really important, and I pray for you to get there if you're not there yet. And I think I started this, right away. I definitely started moving forward right away. I didn't give myself a minute to stop, because my fear was, in stopping, I don't know that I would ever get back up. So for me, a lot of people ask me how I'm doing what I'm doing and how I'm doing so much. I mean, I started it right off. Like, I sold this truck, I bought a car, I started a job. It didn't stop. But I think for me, filling in the time and the space was important to occupy my mind. I'm like one of those people, if I got in a big fight or argument with somebody, I would start doing dishes or something, like cleaning up, or just doing occupies my thoughts when I'm upset. So for me, that was like sort of where I went. But I do want to say that if you're in a crisis situation, I want you to just check out, I'm going to put up right now, hopefully you can see it, that I have some crisis numbers here for you. I have taken this from BetterHelp, and I love BetterHelp. I think if you're not in a crisis, but you're needing some assistance and somebody to talk to who's licensed professional, they would be my favorite pick. I'm really loving how they do things. It doesn't feel quite so clinical to me. Clinically, I was gonna say, I'm gonna make up my own words now. It doesn't feel quite so clinical. It's just it is a really good feel to it. It's funny because I stumbled on them at a time where nobody had heard of them, and now all of a sudden I'm seeing TV commercials, so they're definitely gaining popularity. My guess is because other people like myself have found them, and they're just, it's a hard thing to look away from when you see it, because I love how they're doing things. So that's my favorite, but I do have a list of other resources on my website under the support area. So just one other little thing I wanted to mention on the anger and bargaining phase for me that I went through was, I just wanted to mention, talking about how this is not a linear experience, I just wanted to mention how when my husband got diagnosed with having 3 brain tumors, that's when my grief process started, which I think most people imagine that grief is something that follows death, but I don't know that it is. This isn't, again, nothing I ever talk about is my clinical opinion or anything like that. I'm not diagnosing, treating. You can see my full disclaimer at the bottom as well. But I'm just speaking to my own personal experience with my husband, and I know that for me, I started to grieve when we knew he had cancer or brain tumors, because I was grieving the loss of a life that was so carefree. We didn't worry about anything. We did what we want when we wanted, and we didn't even give too much thought to it. We thought, we're barely 40s, and at the time, I think we just imagined if anything health-wise was going to happen, it was unlikely to happen to us because we were so healthy in everything we did. And it just was such a carefree life that I don't think we realized the gift in that until it was gone. But as soon as we saw those 3 brain tumors, that was for me when I started to grieve. That was when I started to go through all of these phases. And so he actually experienced some of my grief with me. We went through this together, and he had to grieve his life. He went through all the phases for sure. We were angry. we were in a lot of different places. It's hard though, because you're also like, we were hope all the way. And perhaps to a degree that, I don't know if it was unhealthy, but I think you need to stay in a hopeful headspace to get on top of any kind of disease process, especially one like cancer. But I don't know if we were in denial a little bit about just how bad things were, or, we were unwilling to accept that. So yeah, I would say maybe some denial there, especially because the doctors were quite clearly panicked. Nobody ever really spoke to us about just the enormity and the timeline and the prognosis, but that's good. I think lingering on that wouldn't have been helpful, but for sure there's, how do I put it? I don't know, like, denial just makes it sound so bad. I guess, yes, we were in denial. And hope and denial can kind of just clash with one another in a way. Like, if you're trying to stay hopeful, it's really easy to slip into a state of denial, because I think if you truly believe that you're going to get better, then you actually have to let go of the possibility that you might not get that outcome. Does that make any sense? It does to me. It did for us in our process. Like, we just had to hang on to it. This is going to be fine. We have faith. We have trust. And I still feel that way. Yeah, I'm angry, but I still feel like my faith didn't let me down. This didn't just happen to us for no reason. And I don't have to understand God's plan it's not for me to understand right now. I just have to trust that I'm put on a path for a reason, that our story had to be told. And I'm hoping that what I've done here is going to help somebody else. So maybe that's it. Maybe it's just one or two people that really needed to hear our story. So hopefully I'm walking the walk with you, and you just keep tuning in to Can You Cure Cancer? Like I said, I've got a new blog post out for this. So if you want to check it out, do that. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to have subscribers. So subscribe, and that's https://canyoucurecancer.com, and it's YOU, not you. And just check me out and see what you think. And then I'd love for you to subscribe there as well. That way you can just keep following along. I'll give you updates when I've got new stuff coming out, and we can do this together. So take care. Thanks for joining me today. All right, bye guys.
I've been missing the way you touch me, baby. Kisses on my neck and the love you gave me. When I think about it, I go a little bit crazy. It's gotta be more than